Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Melting Pot podcast. My name is Romeo Fs, and I'm the founder and CEO of Lumerous, who are bringing you these podcast episodes and are the creators of Leadership Melting Pot podcast. As you know, every month we dissect and we discuss a particular topic that's relevant to the work we do at Lumerous and the work of wider society. And today we'll be discussing and dissecting the whole matter of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. And we'll be looking at the 2030, which has now been moved to 2050 SDG deadlines. And as this deadline approaches, what role can businesses play in driving the delivery of the SDGs? And to help us with this discussion, I'm so honored to be joined today by Ellora-Julie. Ellora is the Chief Sustainability Officer at Al-Fatam Group. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Or Al-Fatam Group, which is based in Dubai. They are a privately held regional business operated in the automotive, real estate, retail, financial services, and healthcare. They employ about 33,000 individuals across more than 20 countries in the Middle East, Asia, and Africa, and partners with over 200 other businesses worldwide. Before joining Al-Fatam Group, Ellora spent 16 years at McKinsey. I'm pretty sure we don't have to explain that. McKinsey is actually one of the top 5 consulting firms in the world, where she served clients worldwide, helping them to build global cross-industry competencies, and also was very instrumental in building a sustainability center at McKinsey. She started her career prior to McKinsey in the telecoms industry, which I found very interesting. And she's also currently a non-exec director and trustee for Youth Business International. And full disclosure, Ellora and I both sit on the board as non-exec directors of YBI. She has an MBA from Wharton, but she also has an engineering degree, which I also found really, really very fascinating. I didn't know that. I can see the link between, the work that you're doing now as far as sustainability is concerned and engineers. And they always say that engineers make the best leaders anyway, so I'm pretty sure about that. So thank you very much for your time today. And as I said, really honored to have someone with your level of experience and expertise on our podcast to share with our community. I think where I'd really love to start, though, is just giving our audience, an explanation of what are the SDGs and what are their overall objectives, because I find that a lot of people still aren't aware of what these are.
Thanks, Romeo. And first, thanks for having me. It's great to be joining you on this podcast. I'm not sure how I should take the comments on engineering, and I'll think about it. By the way, one observation I have about where sustainability is today is, there are quite some similarities with the telecom industry. So we might touch this later on. Maybe to start off, I think it's a good question you're asking. First of all, the space of sustainability is full of acronyms, and you using SDG, and sometimes people use ESG. A lot of it even touching the GRI, ISSB.
Yes.
I mean, the list is probably 30 plus, right? And I must say, I've been in the space for 10 plus years, and I saw all those frameworks emerge, and I can really see how it's brushing off people sort of the wrong way, right? Because I think you've got a quite simple, daunting, but simple problem, which is, climate warming, climate action. Everyone can sort of see it. So that the problem in itself, I think, is simple to grasp, not simple to solve at all, but simple to grasp. And then you've got an overlay of very complex frameworks, all of them with very good intention, I think, trying to help slice the problem, which is so big. But So I think it's first point is, okay, SDGs, but what about the other things, right? I think nicely, so we're starting to see some convergence, right?
Yes.
So there's convergence in the thinking, which is the framework for it. To your specific question of where do we stand and are we going to reach those targets in 2030, which is basically 5 years from now, right? Every company has their business plan in place. Most of the things are actually quite set for the next 5 years in a way. I think there was a recent study from Forward Faster, also from the UN, measuring that only 15% of the SDGs are actually on track.
Yes, yes.
And not only this, but on 30%, we've regressed compared to the last few years, right? So I think we're at a turning point, right, where this long list, so SDGs are very much the macroeconomic lens to it. So they include things like life support and life on water, underwater, solving for poverty. It's very, very broad, and it's been very helpful, I think, to get us where we are. But the fact that, I think progress is not a linear curve, and we're not saying, yes, X percent, Y percent, like that steady growth. I think also highlights the fact in the last 3 years, there's been disruption no one expected when those SDGs were set. I mean, I'm of course thinking the wars on 2 regions, but also the economic disruption we're seeing now. We're seeing half of the population of the world voting this year, right?
Yeah.
Bringing in Europe, possibly in other geographies soon, quite some big disruption. And so, forget linear curves, right? This is all about evolving targets and changing directions. And I think that conflicts a little bit with setting a high ambition, trying to solve this one quote unquote simple problem, where we started off in 2015, right?
Yeah.
And that makes the road probably more complex going forward.
But there are 17 of these goals, right? And as you said, it's a broad kind of framework, but they were initially set up for nations or countries to progress and achieve, correct?
Yeah, and it's interesting. So, for example, you mentioned our broad set of businesses and industries, right? So we do have retail businesses. We represent IKEA, for example, in a number of markets.
Yeah.
And if you take IKEA, and many companies have done this, right, is then mapping the specific SDGs against your sustainability pillars. So you really tie it to your strategy and then it demonstrates proper impact, right? So for example, in the IKEA plan, you would see regenerating resources, which is critical and which is one of the pillars of the IKEA strategy for sustainability.
Yeah.
That is perhaps with, I think it's 15, right? Like, life on birds and life underwater, right?
Yeah.
So I think that mapping is important. Otherwise, it's very difficult to demonstrate progress and measure it.
Yeah. We'll for those of you who are listening, we'll put a complete list of the 17 SDGs, in the notes of the podcast and what they mean, etc. But we're gonna get to the whole, reason why businesses should get involved. But I'd really like to get your sense in terms of they have now shifted the goal from the achievement of these from 2030 to 2050. What do you think were some of the challenges that countries were facing in terms of achieving these goals within the set time frame of the 15 years? So they were set in 2015. The target was 2030. From your expertise and your experience, what are some of the things that you think these nations were experiencing, why they had to now shift it to 2050?
I mean, it's a very good question. I don't think there's a simple answer. In my view, there's 3 main roadblocks, and we've already touched one of them, right? Which is the need for very clear regulatory development, standardization, measurements, right? You can show progress only if you compare apples to apples.
Yes.
And I think we're seeing some of this when we're probably not there. One topic, I'm looking at quite, like you take carbon, you've got fantastic frameworks in place. I think they're widely adopted. I'm thinking GHG protocol, this is all, you're not going to debate it. When you say in your report it's 1 ton of CO2 equivalent, you really mean it's 1 ton. I mean, this is very accepted. If you look at nature and biodiversity, right? it's a very different story, where putting a price on nature is still highly debated, and there is no GHG equivalent. And I think that's really preventing the evolution of that space, although there is interest, but where do you funnel the money, etc. So the first piece, I think, of the roadblocks is around the regulatory harmonization and that unifying measurement. I think another piece which was highlighted big time at COP28, right, is the financing piece. Right?
Yes, the lack of funding, yes.
And well, it's lying and it's diversification. You cannot say, I mean, this is where my telecom background, as much as it sounds surprising, I guess, it's a little bit the same where you say you've got to spend a lot of money, take you back then on fiber deployment, right? And so who actually is going to invest in this greater good, right? Same with schools and universities. And so it's micro funding, but it's also diversification of the sources of funding. And some of it, private sector is very well placed to address. Some of it will not be easy for private sector to make a return on. And then perhaps there is another mechanism required. And you're starting to see this again. I think we're really moving fast. And you've got green financing, green loans. You've got a number of instruments also in the Middle East, actually, right? There's been breakthroughs in this last 12 months, 6 months, right, with instruments being put in place. But I think it's still very nascent. And then the third roadblock, in my view, is the current cost of some of the innovation, right? Some of the climate tech is just, and that's linked to the lack of funding, because if you don't have the funding, you cannot test it at scale, and we don't see the economies of scale. So those are interlinked, obviously. But if you just take, as an example, direct air capture and the current price, like over $600 per ton, it will prevent adoption, and it will not also allow for the right technology to emerge rapidly at scale, which is what we need just from a carbon equation, right? Aside. So I think those three things, sort of the regulatory harmonization, the diversification of finance, and then some speeding up of the scaling of innovation so that cost goes down, right, are really needed in conjunction. And this is a global average. Of course, you've got different issues by region. I think here we've seen in this, again, 6 months, 9 months, a big acceleration on financing, on innovation, but not on harmonization. So I think the proper roadblocks differ by country or by region, let's say, right? But overall, I think those are the three main roadblocks.
One thing that jumps to mind, it's the current increase in conflict and instability across many countries. If you look at like Africa, if you look at what's happening in Ukraine, some parts of the Middle East, don't you think that these factors disrupt the progress and causes resources to be diverted from this whole kind of agenda to kind of solving those issues?
Obviously, you're right. I think it's even more pervasive than this, and everyone was talking about decoupling of supply chains, right? And that's another topic, right? Because it complexifies the supply chain topic.
Yes.
So you might have been, I don't know, 5 years ago, doing progress and working with your suppliers. So you need to start this afresh and rethink it. Of course, to your point, there was a prioritization of resources on, are you going to really worry about their ethical credential, or are you just going to prioritize diversification because of the geopolitical tension, right? So I think it's it's not just diverting attention, as you say, which is right, but it's also two things. One is very pervasive, for example, supply chain. And then, we, as you say, we operate in a large number of markets, many of which are emerging economies. And so I'll give you an anecdote, but I think it reflects quite well how sustainability means different things to different people. When we bring in our new employees, right, to join the group, you have a very diverse set of profiles. And so if you're going to talk about sustainability with a white-collar employee in Dubai, their interest would be very much, possibly about things like, what about regenerative agriculture? What are the new types of diet? Should I continue? Should I not?
Yes.
At a personal level, right? But then if you bring in a technician, say from the Philippines, right, which comes from a village, and it's first person to work in their family, and obviously it's a very different set of topics that they're interested in. Sustainability does matter, but it's probably more climate risk and floods and prevention and helping the rural communities. So I think also with this conflict and this fragmentation of the world, that makes all of us having to have a much more fragmented view of what exactly do we mean by sustainability, right? A group like us, you say 32,000 employees, there is a huge part of our social mandate, which is around employment, right?
Yes.
And so we cannot put this to side and say, we'll just talk about climate. I mean, of course, I don't like ESG as a set of acronyms because it sounds weird, but and it lumps together a number of things. But
a number of things, yes.
Still, there's some value to it, obviously. And so I think what one cannot say, I'm going to do E, I'm going to do S. You really got to think of the basket of topics. The reason they were included in the first place is they were topics and metrics which a financial investor didn't have access to, but they were even in some cases to have material impacts on your business. So the financial community should have had access to that's how it came together. And so I really think, again, at least for a group like us, it's important to take all of those consideration and then, prioritize, invest in the right things where you can have an impact.
That's so true. I mean, so let us look now at, and I think that sets a good context in terms of giving our audience a background of SDGs and where they come from. But let's zone in now in terms of why should business care? Why should your business really care about the SDGs? What's the business case for this really?
Yeah, I mean, I'll cite my ex-colleagues from McKinsey, right? There was an article that came out in 2019, which I think is still very valid, which said there is 5 ways in which sustainability creates value, right?
Yeah.
And the first one is around top line growth, new consumer demand. I'll give you an example from our portfolio. We launched electric vehicles. We're the first one with electric vehicles in Saudi. So there is new demand for a new product, and that's an opportunity for business. So number 1 is top line growth. Number 2 is reducing costs. I think still today, both in my group, but any conversation I have with CSOs anywhere in the world, there is still energy efficiency available, right? There is still more we can do to be systematic. It can be about energy consumption. It can be about, waste management, but there is still some savings to be had by being systematic. The simple reality is in the past, because you had no sustainability lens or function or CSO or, no organizational structure to look at this systematically, it was very opportunistic. A division would say, let us save costs this way, but it was not thought through in a systematic way. So reducing cost is number 2. The third one is managing the risk and the regulatory downside. Right? Sitting in Europe with the CSRD coming into play, your fees attached, if you don't do the right things, your turnover. And so, this is value protection, right? If you don't do the right thing, you could have some regulatory downside.
Yes.
The fourth one, which, is trickier to measure, and I think there is different opinions in different regions on that, but it's, increased talent attraction, people care about if you get talent. I think, again, the data points differ by region. I think in Europe, it's definitely true. In other region, it takes different flavors, I would say. So you need to be a bit more specific than that. It's not just, with sustainability, you get the best talent. It's a little bit more complex. And then the last one, right, for businesses looking to raise capital, there is a lot of Greek capital available. So, you put those 5 things together, I think there's still a great framework to think of it and not go through the rabbit hole of, this sounds like a great idea, why don't we do it? I think I applied this and very simple framework, right? So, are we going to create new demand? Are we going to save costs? Are we going to protect the risk? Or are we going to attract specific people we try to attract? So I think that's a useful way to be also having a top and sit at the top table. Otherwise, if you speak a different language, I think it's very difficult to get your budget, to get your people, and to actually do something. Right? So, with that framework, it plugs into a P&L. Right?
That's where you want to be. but also for me as well is I mean when I listen to those 5 points and I kind of think about them like working in an ecosystem, I'm thinking about the whole idea of, if businesses operate and within those that ecosystem of those 5 points you just mentioned, they will grow. And as business grow, they will employ more people, which means that, you reduce it, you're helping to reduce poverty. And if you look at the fact that you are looking to employ, maybe, you're looking at the whole issue of diversity and inclusion within your workplace, and you're saying, okay, we're going to ensure that we hire more women, more people from disadvantaged background, then you're also looking at reducing inequality in society and reducing overall, and increasing the social impact as well. So I think a lot of that comes into play as well. But one of the things that we find, that we're finding, is that a lot of companies are finding it very challenging, integrating the SDGs into their business strategies to benefit the companies, benefit the company. A lot of them tend to do this as CSR, like as a side project. It's nice to do. I want people to think of us, of doing really great stuff, and not realizing that integrating it into your business strategy has a much wider benefit. I like what you talk about. You said value protection, right? They're struggling with that. How do you find, in your role, are you finding this challenging, and how do you kind of work with your team, the cross section within the organization, to try and get the whole sustainability theme integrated into the overall strategy of the business?
Yeah, and it's funny. There was a recent, so again, I speak from a Middle East perspective. There was a recent survey from PwC in the Middle East, right, like really recent, which has this fantastic metric of 50% of companies here in the region are now embedding sustainability in their strategy, right? And I think that speaks exactly to your point. I was surprised by the high number. I think that the second question is, what does embedding mean? And, what they did, what did they meant, right?
Yes.
and actually discussed that with them, and I think specifically there's a few things, right? We talked about suppliers earlier, right? And it can be starting to screen your supplier, but this is a trade region, right?
Yes.
We've always been a trading region, right? Like it's a region anchored in trading, and so supply chain extremely important for any business here. And so, it could be embedding it in the way you screen suppliers. It could be embedding it in the new products, like we discussed before. I mentioned electric vehicle. This was obviously done even before I joined, right? So this was embedded de facto, if you like, right? It was just a strategy. So, I think it's tricky. I don't think there is a simple recipe. What I think is, there's a few concepts that are helpful. Number one is materiality. Everything now it's pretty.
And maybe you could just kind of explain to the community what materiality is really, I know it's not easy to explain, but as best as you can.
Very simply, right? We started off saying ESG is a laundry list of topics, and etc. I think any business needs to really, they say, I really want to address sustainability, I want to do something. The very first question is, what actually matters to us? And there is this notion of double materiality. So it's, what impact am I having on planet and people? And then it's also, what is the planet's condition having as an impact on me?
Right.
So we're talking about the floods in April in Dubai. This caused a lot of disruption. We have a real estate business. So when you have wind, you might have some damage. In business, we might have some claims. Anecdotally, people might buy a different type of car because they're worried of the height of the water, etc. Right? So that's the material impact of climate on my business.
Right.
And then conversely, there is the material impact that I can have. So let's say I'm destroying a national park. I'm having a bad impact on the biodiversity I operate. Right. So it's really that. But so I think starting with materiality is critical, because at least you speak a business language. You speak topics that are de facto in the strategy, that are de facto material, meaning they have a P&L impact, You mentioned type of talent. So in the region, there is from the government Emiratization targets. So any business needs to reach a certain number of local employees. So, those are things that are anyway included in the business. And so you need to really sort of work with the material issues and help deliver on that because they are impacts. So I think materiality is one. I would say this might be specific to the region where I operate, but I think Dogma is not really helpful. And so you've got to be, we're not in a CSRD environment, right?
Yes.
And so there is, I would say, indifference is not this fine, this stick to say, well, that's what we need to do because otherwise we get fined. And so I think understanding, I'll give you a very concrete example with AI. There is a lot of interest and use cases being deployed in the broader Middle East region on AI. It's very obvious that the notion of responsible AI in our markets would be defined differently than in DC, than in Brussels. But what is responsible AI is mainly defined over there for that, right? And so how do we think about that? Perhaps, and this is proven, there's some sort of illustrative examples already coming up, right? To say, well, people are more willing to give away their data in some parts of the world, and in India, for example, if they get really a benefit, could be a discount, could be some tangible benefit. So that's a quite different frame of reference. And so we just, that's what I mean by not being dogmatic. So there is no single answer, this is bad, opt-in is bad, etc. No. Let's really understand the voice of the consumer, the proper business cases, and then have a point of view that can be sustained and is fair, right? And can be defended.
That's really really key, because I remember I think it's in the UAE where I was hearing that the government has just kind of started training a whole host, the entire population around the use of AI, etc. But do you think companies have a duty, though, to educate consumers around things around sustainability and SDG and ESG? I mean, we know all of them like they're just in the same bucket. I mean, do companies have a responsibility to educate consumers or the wider society around these things?
I don't like educate, because I think it's a two-way street, right?
Right. Okay.
I'll give you again an example. We have a digital lifestyle platform called Blue Rewards, on which we have 3 million consumers across all of our business.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think in some areas, our consumers are asking for more than we would think they would be asking, and then in some areas for less. And so again, I'm all for really listening to the voice of the consumers, the specificities of the market. And I think there are spaces where we need to educate consumers. This could be transparency of the data, showing, scope, like free carbon footprint, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, for example. So that transparency can be helpful. Did you know when you buy this, etc. But it can be both ways. And I think now with a lot of the AI or digital tools, actually, companies also have a way to connect much more with their consumers and listen directly to what exactly they're asking for. I think, for example, we might have a bias that younger people are much more interested in sustainability than older, right? That might not be true, right?
It is definitely not true. It's definitely
exactly. But so I think having the facts and thinking, and by the way, if this is older people, then perhaps, I don't know, the format to educate that is different, right?
Yes.
And e-learning, it might be a proper, so anyway, it has implication. But I think as a company, you do have a duty to understand where the market is going. Market being your consumers, geopolitics, your suppliers. It's like the food ecosystem of stakeholders. And back to our very beginning, right? With the complexifying geopolitics, with the decoupling, et cetera, it is even more difficult than before to comprehend this. But that's a duty for business.
I mean, one of the things that, before I jump to that, so do you think that earlier you mentioned the whole notion of the CSRD in Europe. The FCA is now looking at new regulations around ESG. You have the US Securities Commission also looking at these regulations, and many different jurisdictions are coming up with regulations as it relates to ESG sustainability. The UN is pushing really hard now, around encouraging businesses to help to deliver the SDGs. It's one of the things that we do a lot here at Numerous is helping companies to map their initiatives towards SDGs and coming up with the reporting frameworks to report into the UN Sustainable Financial Hub, around how they're impacting the SDG. Do you think that these regulations are pushing companies or are one of the main reasons why companies are looking to get more involved in the area of sustainability and ESG?
I think they've definitely done a lot, and it's a bit the point on standardization. My analogy with telecoms, I'll do it here, but many years ago when I started in telecoms, you had very different standards in Europe and in the US. So in Europe, you would use a TDMA phone, but then if you would go to the US, it was TDMA, it wouldn't work, right? You needed another phone.
Yeah.
And so, of course, this was a barrier to adoption, right? Because it made it complicated, and you would have to buy two phones, etc. And so the moment you had standardization and interoperability, it all became a lot bigger, a lot more ubiquitous, costs went down, and all that stuff. So I'm a big proponent of organization and having common standards, because I think they help, again, compare apple to apple, but the right priorities. If someone is talking about, waste in a certain unit, and someone else, what are you going to do with this, right? Action, etc.
And also, if you have, like, for example, your business that has, operations across many jurisdictions, I mean, that's like a nightmare.
Yeah, but even take a very simple example, right? If I look at like tons of CO2, if it's my car business, it's going to be per car. And if it's my real estate, it's going to be per square foot, right? So how do I even those are mundane questions, but they come into play. And so I think that standardization, this organization is very helpful. I think the other side of the equation is overburdening business with too many KPIs, metrics, measures, having to verify it on a yearly basis. This is helping a cottage industry of people to judge for you. That's one thing, right?
Yeah.
But is it really helping to better decision making, and is it really helping with climate impact? I would challenge this, and so I think it's finding that right balance where you have prioritized KPIs that are really moving the needle and are the right set. And then having the agility also to say, well, that was helpful till today. Let's maybe now evolve to something else, rather than my curriculum dogma. On a single way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, agility is so key, and I have a question on that. But before I jump to that question around agility, I remember having a conversation with a CEO of a large manufacturing company around this whole topic of SDG and ESG, and he's like, "Look, I went to business school. When I went to business school, they taught me about running the business to make a profit, leadership in terms of managing my people, protecting the reputation, and making sure I deliver shareholder value. Like, no one taught me about this social impact, this environmental climate stuff." And he's like, "This is just one other burden that I have on my plate right now." But as a chief sustainability officer, like, one of your duties is really to get the leadership buy-in, right? In terms of moving the business, especially if the business is like, a huge, as they would say, tanker to move. How do you go about like getting this leadership buy-in from?
I completely disagree with your CEO, completely. And I think history shows that that's not true. And that most businesses that have been resilient over the years, I'm talking hundreds of years, right?
Yes.
Have actually typically done the right thing, however they defined it. So, there's many books on that. But, you look at the classic example from 100 years back, Hershey, the chocolates, right?
Yes, yes.
Building schools for their employees. Why are they doing this? I take Tata in India. I think that, Tata has done the same. Gittel has done the same. So, and this is true of other companies in Europe as well. So number one, I would, disagree that it's a new thing. Business has never thought about that. Social impact comes on top. I'm going to say to survive and thrive over 40, 50, 60 years as a business, you've done the right thing. Somehow that equilibrium works with people, with planets.
Yeah.
So that's number one. That's my personal belief, very strong belief. And then, to your question, I think Alcitan Group is a very good example of that. We're a 90-year-old trading company, and it's a new job. It is a new function.
Yeah.
But I certainly do not think I'm coming on top. It's a new topic. It's never been top of mind. I think the way it's discussed, all those acronyms like ESG, SDG, that's all new. But those are framing around concept, which is business and society, which is the value of business, which what you framed it over time since beginning of the capitalist era, right? Those concepts have existed, and I don't want us to forget sustainability has resilience in it, and like us being a 90-year-old company, we have a resilience. I'm nobody to say we don't have anything, let's build it. It's rather how do we use and leverage those big building blocks around resilience. In our case, it's the people we employ, it's the markets in which we operate, and then build on top those things that matter today that didn't matter at all like 5-10 years ago, 90 years ago, around the climate risk, those floods happening on an urban basis. That's all new. So we need to add those competencies, but it needs to build on a robust resilience framework. So the job is new, but I think the concept and the context, to answer your question, it's embedded in the leadership thinking, and that's the most important.
I think you're so right, because and as an engineer, I mean, I'm pretty sure you'll understand this, that sometimes we tend to hijack some of these words to mean something completely different. So nowadays, when you speak to people about sustainability, they think about climate. But sustainability is not really related to climate. It's about making sure that something or an organization can be sustained over a long period of time, right? So I think that's kind of where some of the nuances have come up. Like one of the other words, which it's integrity. Like people think of integrity around morality and ethics, but it's an engineering word. Where you look at it, the bridge is built, it's doing what it's supposed to do, meaning that the bridge has integrity. It's built to operate the way it's supposed to operate. So I think that's where some of the misconceptions have come into place, especially with senior leaders. When they think of things like sustainability, they're not thinking about the true meaning of the word, but what the nuance that has just been kind of laid on top of it. So you spoke about the whole idea of this being embedded in the leadership psyche at your business. Do you find that helps with, as you mentioned earlier, the agility, the ability to move quickly and to adapt as things change, in society or in the world generally?
I would say we're in such a transition period. I don't think rapidity is what we should be after,
right?
As any business, right? And the climate innovation is being tested. The answers are not there, right? So we're not in a situation where we say, I know how to improve my clouds, I'm just going to go and deliver those improvements, right? And so I think it's agility in a sense of, trying many things, being present, being invested where you should be, testing. I'll give a completely different example on the S dimension, but, hybrid working.
Yes.
In COVID, this was amazing. This was the best thing everything could be done by working hybrid. And then, oh no, it's absolutely not. You need in person, otherwise people are not promoted. the answer is in the middle. And as a business, as an individual, you've got, to try, you've got to understand what are the new metrics that this disruption is creating as metrics, which perhaps were not relevant before. So to answer your question, I think the agility is that if you have the conceptual buy-in, right, to say, we've got to play in, like you said, in the sustainable resilience space. We're in there for the long run. We want to do good at a conceptual level. That's very helpful because at least, you've got to sit at the table. But it still means the discussion at the table needs to happen. And so how do you do that into, you asked at the beginning, embedding it into strategy? I think that's very difficult because in the end, you're talking CapEx allocation. And to be very blunt, right? And, what's going to get prioritized, what's not, what's the payback you expect. I think those discussions are not easier, but they're probably more rational and they're probably more under the right terms. That's my view.
Yeah. So what are some, building on that, what are some of the specific actions that that you think companies can take? Earlier, you gave these kind of 5 points in terms of the benefits, the business case for businesses to do this. What are some of the specific actions that you think businesses can take to align their operations with SDGs, or just to be a force for good, really?
Yeah, so I've mentioned some of the ones. It's funny if you look at the sustainability reports, because now it's mandatory in many parts of the world. You look at the sustainability reports from many, many businesses, and you try to sort of distill the key topics. I think there are really 3-4 buckets. One is around energy consumption and capturing those cost savings, new technology. Solar, obviously, in this market is very available, very cheap. We have sun all the time, so we of course should. So energy consumption is the first bucket. The second one is circularity and waste management. And I think here globally, we're in a very different place. And there's very different types of waste. And some are more advanced and some are clearly not. And having some kind of convergence of frameworks again, some simplification. I'll give you an example from UAE. Waste management is designed at the Emirates level. So it's not UAE level, it's Emirates level. So that's a degree of complexity with, moving around the waste, etc. So I think on that space, there's still a lot of work to be done. Of course, then you have the people agenda, which takes different flavors in different organizations, diversity and inclusion, some really good employee practice, management of like your relationship with the communities. I think that's your space to know it very well. But so that takes many, many flavors. I think the days where this was blanket D&I are gone.
Yes. Thank God for that. Thank God for that.
Yes, exactly. More important. So now we're moving to something a bit smarter. So that's good.
Yes.
And then it's that bucket around ethics. And I mentioned responsible AI. I think this is your favorite topic, AI and sustainability. You have this love-hate relationship, which I find very interesting. Where on the one end, you probably saw the Microsoft announcements with the growth of AI, which is unprecedented. They're going to struggle to achieve their net negative ambition. But on the flip side, AI can probably be the only way to solve for some of those very complex climate challenges. The breakout. So in both a very positive force that we can deploy well, but it will be a big hindrance if we let it sort of proliferate without control and without smarter computing and smarter energy sources. So, in the end, I think those are the type of initiatives that are directly having climate impact or social impact that business can take. You've mentioned CSR. I think CSR has a role to play. Oftentimes, those are year-long initiatives that have been very written locally with very specific NGOs, foundations, etc. I think they really need to be innovated. They need to be connected with the business, connected with strategy. But I do think there is a role for charitable giving, for foundations, and for linking. I'll give you an example we have, so we have all the businesses, but we also have a school foundation, an education foundation. And one of the big topics is how do you bring in the younger generations, kids in schools that are starting their learning journey, and bring them awareness on what is sustainability, and get them to contribute. And we started to implement some initiatives that cross over between business initiative, but also have some kind of activity done by the school children with NGO. So I do think that the two need to work more in conjunction, but they both have a role to play.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think, you mentioned the whole idea about, working in the community. I think that's where the CSR bit comes in as well, because it helps with the risk mitigation, because you're on the ground, you're hearing a lot of what's happening in the community. It helps with building a new customer base, because your brand is kind of building a reputation there, etc. But then also, it's just helping to widen the impact that you're making, and shareholders like that, consumers like that, the wider society kind of likes that. It comes back to the point though that do you believe that collaborating with, for example, you mentioned the schools, the school program that you guys run, collaborating with like NGOs or other stakeholders or governments could be beneficial for companies to help them to kind of drive, the impact around sustainability, ESG, SDG much wider?
Totally. And that's been a topic I've been very involved in and very passionate about for many years. So it's not only for sustainability. I think in many ways, businesses need to have much closer relationship to their broader stakeholder group. There was this famous piece from Business Roundtable, this has to be now 5-6 years ago, saying business needs to engage with all stakeholders, not just shareholders.
Yeah,
I couldn't approve more. This was said in the context of sustainability, but I think it's a much broader topic. You often see blind spots, could be with your regulators, where you have no idea how the government. I think the famous phrase is, the government's not rational, they don't know what they're doing. They are rational. They're just very different. They have a political agenda, and need to be elected, but they're rational. The rational is different, but they're rational. So, that's a typical blind spot. The famous one on boards, everyone talks about it. We need younger people on boards because our consumer average age is 30 and our board members are 70. Everyone is talking about that. So, consumer group segmentation of representation of some segments is very important. Women, another classic one was medical procedures for women not as advanced, because there was no sample of medical doctors at scale that were women. So I think the importance of engaging with broader sets of stakeholders is absolutely obvious and very needed, also in the context of sustainability. But not only, you hear things which you would not hear otherwise. That in business, like in many spaces, I think the biggest risk is echo chamber, working between your own sort of knowledge of where you are, how good you are, what your numbers are, etc. But actually, you need to know what others are thinking about you, etc. And again, I think some of the direct ways to engage consumers are very helpful through this now.
Yes.
Just feedback, and a lot of companies are not tapping into this. That's great for consumers. I think it should also apply to the broader set. You mentioned NGOs, activists, and this is an important spot not to be blind, and then regulators.
Yeah, and one of the other things that we find as well in terms of partnering or collaborating with like NGOs or governments is that you spread your resources much wider and get a much wider impact, because sometimes you find NGOs can tap into other charitable funding or government funding, and if you kind of match that, you can report on the wider benefit, even though you funded the entire program. And NGOs welcome that, because the other thing we find that businesses bring to NGO is that level of expertise, that level of that knowledge of the measuring and the planning and all that. I'm not saying it doesn't exist in the third sector, but there's a different way of thinking between you and I know this between the third sector.
I think it's a period of change, and I think it's helpful. And I think it's helpful. It's also not just business telling NGOs what to do. I think it's sometimes it's actually for a good reason that measurement's difficult.
Yeah.
Having that discussion and for business to understand why it's difficult can also be enlightening. So again, I think that's a two-way dialogue that's very fruitful if you conduct it well and with a listening mindset.
Yeah. One of the other big challenges that we find businesses face with, and, this is something that we work with businesses on, and we have a tool that helps them to do this, is the whole idea of the measuring and the reporting, because the data around these things can be so fragmented. You mentioned earlier that you're talking about your automotive carbon is measured differently from the real estate, different units, etc. But then when you have to put that together to do a report, especially to the regulators, the challenges come where that is concerned. How have you found that, I know this is, a growing space for you in terms of your new role, but have you seen that challenge, and how are you approaching it in terms of trying to overcome it?
I think the word I've heard the most in my sustainability networks in the last 12 months have been prioritization. And so not specific to us at all, but I think all of us in CSO positions are now saying, forget the long list of the 50 ESG metrics.
Yes.
The 3 where I can show change in the next 6 months or 12 months. So, and let's find the ones. So I talked about materiality earlier, but that still there was a down to probably 30 or so.
Right.
And what I've heard a lot, and I quite like recently, right, is forget that. What are the 3 things? I heard recently when I go see a bank and discuss, ESG in the context of green capital. In the end, they want to know my energy consumption. They want to know, whatever. And then one social, but it's very few things that they're interested in.
Right.
They get the report because they need to ask for the report. This is in Europe. But, the 3 numbers they want me to know top of head and they're going to challenge me on, it's those 3. So that's what we do in detail. And I find that helpful. Again, I think this really helps to focus attention of business, of the leadership, of the employees, and really say, okay, we're going to tackle this, but when we're really going to do it, we're not going to pretend we're saving the planet and then you won't see anything changing in the day-to-day. So I think that notion of very hard prioritization or 3 metrics is a very interesting new concept.
Yeah. I mean, because you're so right. Like one of the things we keep saying to our clients, don't try and eat the elephant all at once, because they just do everything, and you're like, one, you don't have the resources, you don't have the knowledge internally, the capacity, all of that. Just find, as you said, 2 or 3.
But you would also want to be credible, right? I think that there's been a day for greenwashing, and they were doing it. Right? Yeah. But I think today, like, forget even trying to greenwash. Like, it's too late. You should have done it before. Do something now. You can't even do that. So, just be, minimalist, but do it well.
Yeah, people call you out so quickly on this greenwashing. And the other thing that we came up with is something called swashing, the social washing as well, right? Yes. People just like giving some money, and then they just make this big press, thing around, like, that's just not good enough. Do you have any examples of, like, I know you mentioned something around the school program that you guys do, but do you have any other examples that you could share in terms of, projects either within your current business or that you've seen other businesses do well around this whole notion of sustainability?
Yeah, I think there is a large variety. There is, some. So I think the school one was a good example because that's very extreme. I think some of extreme in the sense engaging a community like over in the classroom, which you would not typically be engaging with. In some of the markets where we operate, there's been community events. So, for example, in our IKEA stores, we got some in UAE. We've got some in Oman, in Qatar, and so bringing people in the stores, right, and having them engage around the products that there is now. And we were one of the pilots for that. There is a sustainable shop within the IKEA store where in that sub shop you only find the sustainable products. And so bringing the communities for days of engagement in that store has also had very good feedback. So that's all your consumers, but which you engage in a different way when you have a space like an IKEA, which is very, very advanced, talking a lot about it. But it's not just talking, it's not just the green boards you put in every handy. It's also doing the events and bringing the community together. So I think this has been quite innovative ways to do it, which are tailored for the markets. So you do more family activities if it's on the weekend and things like that. But that I think has that very good engagement from the different groups.
Yeah, IKEA is going to be in many case studies in many MBA courses in the next couple of years. Like they have been. I was reading where they kind of transformed the entire cotton industry in parts of Bangladesh and India as well, in terms of the work that they're doing. Before we go though, like we started off, in terms of like, the deadline in terms of the SDGs. What do you think the future of the SDGs are beyond the deadline? So, and how do you think what role do you think businesses should play in terms of shaping the future of, we're calling them the SDGs, but let's say sustainability going forward?
I'm not sure you like my answer, but I don't think I would be here if I had an answer. It's such a difficult question, Omi.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
I think it's really on the rail now, and it would be inappropriate to say anything. I think the way I think of it as a business leader is more really such a period of disruption. Right? The ships are moving big time. We mentioned it, right? It's geopolitics, it's politics, it's economics. There's a lot of disruption. And so I would say as a sustainability leader, we have an obligation to sort of this is the agility point, keep reflecting how actually our mandate, our priorities evolve and keep them grounded and keep them present, but in the right way, and support the business in that resilience journey. So that would be my short-term answer. I think on the future in general, I have to be hopeful that we get to a more stable situation to then be able to say, well, what's that? We've achieved some of them, we've not achieved. What are the big gaps? Let's rethink how we move forward. I think that the simple reality of demographics and economics is the world is quite different in 25 than it was in 2015 when they were written. Yes. And so that asked for a reconsideration of what should be the priorities given forward. And I don't have the answer, but I think we should be resilient in this complicated turmoil period and then start preparing for what might come next. That would be my final thought.
Good. I think that's so perfect. The whole idea of businesses need to just keep doing the horizon scanning, try and have the engagement with the stakeholders as well will kind of help to kind of bring out some of that as well, and just iterate, because you can't say you're just being in this lane. Sometimes you're going to have to move or detour to come back on this. Well, listen, I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I really, really enjoyed it as well. Thank you so much for your time. We could talk about this for forever, really. There's so much that we can cover. We haven't even touched on the whole idea of these massive regulations that's coming into place, to just kind of shape things up, so, and the pressures from investors as well and wider stakeholders. I think we're in an interesting space right now as far as sustainability, CSR, ESG, whatever you want to call it is, because and for people, for like CSOs like yourself, man, there is just going to be a mountain of work coming your way. And for us, like consultants, like us, like Lumros, that works with businesses around ESG and sustainability and SDG, yes, we're happy for this. It means more work coming our way as well. So good. Listen, enjoy the rest of your afternoon, Ellora. Thank you so much again, and we'll catch up. We'll definitely speak soon. Your thoughts and contributions to the conversation was extremely remarkable and very interesting. So thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to join you.
All right, no problem. Take care. That was indeed a very, very interesting discussion with Ellora-Julie. And I have so many other questions that we could have asked her. But, we will probably have a part 2 or delve with it much further. So some closing thoughts to summarize and to bring the discussion into perspective. The SDGs are not intended to be a finite agenda to be completed by 2050 or which is now the new deadline. They are a framework for ongoing progress towards a more sustainable future. And let's kind of examine what that future might hold. As the world faces new challenges and opportunities, the specific goals and targets of the SDGs may need to be revised and updated to reflect changing circumstances. So, we have to have goals that are evolving and targets that are constantly moving. And this was obvious in the fact that they shifted the deadline from 2030 to 2050 because the shape of the world, the demographic of the world in 2015 when these goals were set has completely changed right now. You look at India being the most populous country in the world, one of the fastest growing economies. You look at places like China, you look at Africa and the growth that's happening across here. You're looking at all the conflicts that are taking place across the world. And you look at the rapid decline in the warming of the planet. So these things had to change and to evolve, right? The other one is, the whole idea of there needs to be a focus on implementation and acceleration in terms of hitting this 2050 deadline. Now we've missed 2030, so we now need to focus on implementation and acceleration. You have to shift towards accelerating progress on the existing goals and also ensuring their implementation at all levels in order not to miss the new 2050 deadlines. And that's, one of the reasons why there's now a big push to get businesses involved in terms of delivering the SDGs. The SDGs were originally designed for countries to accelerate, but now the UN have a big push through, organizations like UN Connect, the UNDP and all these other UN agencies to really push that. There's also a need for greater collaboration, stronger collaboration between governments and business, civil society, NGOs. It will be crucial to achieve the SDGs in the long run, as I was saying earlier, because governments alone can't do this, because they are looking at it more from a macro level. But when you look at the micro level, when you want to get down to the direct impact to the communities and the villages and the society in large, there has to be collaboration with business, civil society in terms of doing that as well. Another big driver towards the future is technology and innovation, right? Technological advancement will have to play a key role in driving progress towards the SDGs. Ellora mentioned this and mentioned the whole idea of AI. In our business at Lumros, when we work with clients, we use AI in terms of helping us to augment and to analyze data far more rapidly so that we can help businesses to make these decisions. Businesses that embrace innovation will, of course, be at the forefront of this progress. And there's so much innovation that's required in order to deliver these SDGs. Innovation around how do we use technology and innovation to drive climate change? How do we use technology and innovation to reduce poverty, to reduce inequality, to reduce to make sure we protect the planet, etc. So, business can play a significant role in shaping the future of the SDGs. They can do this by leading by examples. Businesses can demonstrate leadership by setting ambitious sustainability goals and implementing these innovative solutions. Businesses can be great advocates, right? Businesses do a lot of lobbying. So business can advocate for policies that support the SDGs and encourage governments to take stronger actions. Businesses contribute a lot to political parties. And as part of that contribution, they can say, one of the things that we would like you to do if you get in power is to put in policies that will help to drive and deliver these SDGs. We spoke about the whole notion of collaboration. Businesses can collaborate with other stakeholders to share best practices and develop collective solutions. Stakeholders such as NGOs or community groups or other businesses or even government agencies as well, right? Businesses need to also invest in research and development to accelerate progress towards the SDGs. And another big, component around this, the future of what SDG looks like, is the whole idea of the new regulations that are coming into place. And these regulations require businesses to measure and report. So therefore, there's the whole notion of measuring success and ensuring accountability. And, measuring the overall success in the achievement that you've done around the SDGs will require, a multifaceted approach. We spoke about the whole idea of data. Robust data collection and monitoring systems are essential to track progress on each SDG and identify areas needed for further attention. And also, this data and monitoring can help you to see how you need to iterate. How agile you need to be, how quickly you need to change as circumstances change within your industry or within your environment. Another big driver, around the whole idea of measuring and accountability and monitoring is the idea of transparency and reporting. Businesses, government, and other stakeholders need to be transparent about the progress that they're making on SDGs and report regularly on their efforts. This is the only way you would find that consumers, investors, employees will actually trust you as a business and trust what you're saying. If you're very transparent and you report regularly, and don't be afraid to say, look, we've got this wrong, we've learned our lessons and we're moving on, as opposed to trying to cover things up. You also need to build in accountability mechanisms, all right? Mechanisms need to be established to hold all the actors accountable for their commitments towards SDGs. As we said earlier, Ellora and I were speaking about the whole idea of the days of greenwashing are over, or the day, but what we're seeing happening now is the idea of swashing, social washing, right? And people are calling out businesses now for both social washing and greenwashing. Accountability mechanisms could involve civil society monitoring, things like stakeholder engagement, as I mentioned before, and a potential reward and sanction system for companies when they get it right and also when they get it wrong. So it's the imperative for companies to act is underscored by the growing scrutiny from stakeholders such as investors, consumers, employees, and regulators, who are now demanding greater transparency and responsibility in corporate action, particularly in areas like supply chain management and social impact. So the integration of SDG/ESG, CSR considerations into core business strategy is no longer optional, but is a critical driver for long-term success and the resilience of the business. So the bottom line is, for companies to thrive in this new era, proactive engagement with ESG regulations, a commitment to comprehensive disclosure, and a genuine integration of ESG/SDG principles into core business models and strategies are essential. This journey, as we've said before, while challenging, and can also be resource intensive, presents many opportunities for businesses to lead with purpose, to innovate, and also to contribute positively to, the global quest for a more sustainable and equitable planet and future. So embracing these changes is not just about, regulatory compliance, but it's about seizing the opportunity to redefine corporate success. It's about seizing the opportunity about redefining your corporate purpose. And it's about living the ethos of being good is better for business. So if you'd like to learn more about how, SDGs and how as a business you can help deliver them, or if you are challenged to integrate ESG and SDGs into your business operations, to monitor, measure, and report on ESG and SDGs, contact us at Lumros. Contact us at enquiries@lumros.com, or visit our website. We have a contact us button there as well. Someone is always monitoring it. You can also find us on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Medium at Lumros PLC. So please follow, subscribe, and like us on each of these platforms. And you can also reach out to us on these platforms. So once again, that's all we have for this episode of the Leadership Melting Pot. And we'd just like to thank you for tuning in and for being here with us. Your comments and contributions are welcome. So please feel free to add them in the comments section below, wherever you're listening to this podcast. And as usual, I'd like to acknowledge the Lumros team for, as we call them, Loomers. Those behind the scenes, people like Perpetual, Deborah, and Benjamin, for the hard work that they're doing in bringing you these podcast episodes on a weekly basis. This is the Leadership Melting Pot. It's a podcast of Lumros, and Lumros is a social impact management consultancy. So, all right, folks, that's it for this episode. Until next time, sending you love and gratitude.